Imagine waking up one day to a profound and unsettling silence. It's not the silence of a quiet room, but an internal one. The constant, low-frequency hum of your own anxieties, your nagging insecurities, your petty resentments. It's gone. The mental radio station that endlessly plays the what-ifs and if-onlys has fallen silent. For the first time, you feel a sense of complete, unburdened peace. You are, in this moment, whole. Then, you go to work. A colleague makes an offhand comment about a project you've poured your soul into. It's not even criticism, just a casual, slightly dismissive observation, and something in you snaps. A wave of white-hot, disproportionate rage floods your system. Your vision narrows. A venomous retort springs to your lips, so sharp and cruel it surprises even you. The peace is annihilated. The silence is shattered. You are no longer whole. You are a vessel for a fury that feels both entirely yours and utterly alien. Later, ashamed and confused, you replay the moment. Where did that come from? You ask yourself. That wasn't me. I'm not an angry person. You rationalize. You were tired, stressed, misunderstood. You vow to be better. But the question lingers, a faint, dissonant echo in the now restored noise of your mind. If that rage wasn't you, then who or what was it? This is the central paradox of your existence. You believe yourself to be a singular, consistent, self-aware individual, the author of your own thoughts and the master of your own actions. Yet you are periodically ambushed by emotions that feel foreign, by impulses you consciously condemn, by a version of yourself that emerges from the shadows, acts out its script with terrifying conviction and then retreats, leaving only the wreckage and the shame. You are a kingdom at war with a rebel faction you refuse to acknowledge exists. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung called this rebel faction the shadow. It is not a minor quirk of personality. It is the sum of all those parts of yourself that you have throughout your life deemed unacceptable. The primal instincts, the taboo desires, the childish greed, the raw aggression, the shameful envy, the profound vulnerabilities, everything you were taught to repress, to disown, to hide from the world and most effectively from yourself. You didn't just forget these parts, you actively exiled them. You buried them in the deepest dungeons of your psyche and posted a guard at the door labeled, "I am not that." But the shadow does not disappear. It cannot be annihilated by neglect. It gathers strength in the darkness. It expresses itself in twisted symbolic ways. In the inexplicable sarcasm that hurts a friend, in the self-sabotaging impulse that ruins a moment of success, in the irrational hatred you feel for a stranger who embodies a trait you secretly fear in yourself. It is the source of your most damaging projections, where you see your own hidden flaws magnified and mirrored back at you in others, allowing you to hate them with a purity you dare not turn inward. So the great question is, not if you have a shadow, you do. The monumental question, the one that will define the course of your life, your relationships, and your very sanity, is this. What do you do with it? Do you continue the futile civil war, expending immense energy to keep the vault locked, living in fear of the next inevitable breakout? Or do you dare to do the one thing your entire being is wired to avoid? Do you turn, face the darkness, and slowly, courageously, open the door? The journey we are about to begin is not for the faint of heart. It is a descent into the underworld of the self. It requires you to confront the very thing you have spent a lifetime running from. But on the other side of that confrontation lies the only thing that can truly be called wholeness. Not the fleeting piece of ignorance, but the hard-won integration of a self that is finally, fearlessly, complete. The hidden problem and its psychological, philosophical roots. The problem is not that we have a shadow. The problem is that we are brilliantly, ingeniously wired not to see it. Our entire psychological and social apparatus is a machine designed for one primary function: to maintain a stable, acceptable, and coherent sense of self. This is the persona, the mask we present to the world, polished by expectation and hardened by approval. The persona is necessary. It allows us to function in society, to have a career, to form relationships. But its creation requires a sacrifice. To craft the I, we must define the not I. This is the birth of the shadow. Why is this disowning mechanism so automatic, so deeply ingrained? The roots are both primal and philosophical. From our earliest moments, we are conditioned. A child's raw emotional outburst, a scream of rage, a fit of jealousy, is met not with understanding but with correction. We don't hit. Big boys don't cry. Don't be so selfish. These lessons are not inherently wrong. They are the foundations of civilization. But to the developing psyche, the message is not, learn to integrate this feeling appropriately. The message is, this feeling is bad. To express it is to be bad. Therefore, you must be bad if you feel it. To avoid the terrifying withdrawal of love and the threat of social exile, the child performs a psychological amputation. They sever the unwanted feeling from their conscious identity and hide it away. It is a survival tactic. We choose a fragmented self over an annihilated one. This is where Jung's genius illuminates the trap. He observed that we do not solve these repressed elements, we dissociate from them. They are not gone, they are orphaned. And like any orphan, they clamor for recognition, for energy, for a place in the world. The shadow becomes a separate, autonomous complex within the psyche, a splinter personality that operates outside the direct control of the conscious ego. It has its own voice, its own agenda, and its own power source, the very energy you expend trying to keep it locked down. Philosophers have circled this dark truth for centuries. Friedrich Nietzsche, in his piercing aphorisms, understood that whatever is repressed inevitably returns, often with greater violence. He saw that morality itself could be a tool for the weak to suppress the strong. But on a personal level, his insight reveals that the parts of ourselves we label immoral or evil do not cease to exist through condemnation. They merely learn to wear a disguise. Arthur Schopenhauer's concept of the will, a blind, striving, irrational force at the core of all existence, finds its personal microcosm in the shadow. It is the raw, untamed psychic energy that refuses to be neatly categorized by our rational minds. In the 20th century, Jean-Paul Sartre gave us the most chilling and succinct diagnosis of the shadow's mechanism, though he never used the term. He called it bad faith, mauvaise foi. It is the act of lying to oneself to escape the terrifying burden of freedom and responsibility. We pretend we are not free to choose our actions, that we are determined by our nature, our past, or our circumstances. I'm just an angry person, we say, absolving ourselves of the work to change. Or more commonly, I am not an angry person, thus denying the shadowy impulse altogether. In both cases, we are in bad faith. We refuse to acknowledge the full, contradictory, and frightening truth of what we are. We choose the comfort of the lie over the liberation of the truth. This is the hidden problem. Our entire identity is built upon a foundation of necessary lies. The persona is a useful fiction, but we mistake it for the entire story. The ego, the captain of the ship, believes it is in sole command, unaware that a stowaway, the shadow, is in the hold, capable of steering the entire vessel into an iceberg when the captain's back is turned. We are haunted not by ghosts, but by the living parts of ourselves we've pretended to kill. The psychological tension this creates is immense. It is the source of a pervasive, low-grade anxiety, a feeling of being fraudulent, a sense that if people really knew us, they would be horrified. It fuels our insecurities because we are secretly at war with an internal enemy we will not name. We project this inner conflict onto the world, seeing enemies and threats everywhere, because it is easier to fight a battle outside than the civil war within. We are exhausted not by life's demands but by the endless energy-draining effort of maintaining the dam that holds back the shadowy sea, and the dam, inevitably, is already cracking. The war against your own shadow is a cold war. It is not fought on open battlefields with declarative acts of violence. It is waged through a silent, insidious, and daily occupation of your life. Its consequences are not dramatic explosions. They are a slow, constant leak of your vitality, your authenticity, and your freedom. You become a prisoner living in a panopticon of your own design, your every move policed by an warden you cannot see. The most pervasive consequence is the phenomenon of projection. This is the primary language of the shadow, its main method of communication. Denied direct expression, your disowned qualities do not vanish. Instead, your psyche, in a desperate attempt to make sense of this internal conflict, expels them outward. You literally see these traits in other people, and you react to them with a peculiar intensity, a disproportionate heat that should be your first clue that you are not just seeing them, you are seeing yourself. That colleague whose arrogance grates on you. Look closer. Is it possible you are forced to disown your own desire for recognition, your own need to be seen as competent and important, because you were taught it was arrogant to want such things? That politician you despise with a visceral passion? Could it be that they embody a raw, manipulative, power-seeking energy that you have had to ruthlessly suppress within yourself to maintain your identity as a good person? We do not see others as they are. We see them as we are, or more precisely as we are not, but fear we might be. These projections poison your world. They turn neutral others into personal antagonists. They create a reality populated by enemies, who carry the parts of yourself you refuse to carry. Your hatred for them is, in a twisted way, a misplaced form of self-hatred. This is why political and social debates so quickly devolve into moral fury. We are not just arguing about policies. We are fighting symbolic battles against our own projected shadows, desperately trying to destroy externally what we are too afraid to confront internally. Beyond the social sphere, the shadow exacts a terrible toll on your inner life. It is the source of that inexplicable self-sabotage that Jung termed the neurosis of the good person. You work tirelessly towards a goal, and just as success is within reach, you make a catastrophic, unforced error. It feels like an accident, but it is a mutiny. It is the shadow which thrives in failure and obscurity, torpedoing the persona's quest for achievement and light. Why? Because to the shadow, any expansion of the conscious ego's territory is a threat. If you become too successful, too enlightened, too good, the gap between your persona and your hidden self becomes a chasm, and the shadow fears it will be abandoned forever. It would rather drag the entire psyche down into familiar failure than be left behind in the darkness. This internal rift manifests as a pervasive sense of weariness, anxiety, and inauthenticity. You feel like a fraud, not because you are incompetent, but because you intuitively know you are not whole. You are playing a role, and the effort of maintaining the performance is exhausting. Your life becomes a series of shoulds and ought-tos dictated by the persona, while the shadow whispers its rebellious, but I want tos from the cellar. You are trapped in a double bind. To obey the persona is to feel the strain of repression. To obey the shadow is to be flooded with guilt and shame. There is no right move. This is the psychological equivalent of a Chinese finger trap. The harder you pull to escape, the tighter it constricts. Neurologically, this constant state of low-grade civil war keeps your body in a subtle but sustained fight-or-flight response. The amygdala, your threat detection center, is perpetually on alert, not because of a tiger in the bushes, but because of the tiger in your own basement. Your body does not know the difference between a real external threat and the psychological threat of your own repressed content. The result is a life lived under a gray sky of stress, a diminished capacity for joy, and a body perpetually braced for an attack that, from its perspective, is coming from inside the house. The ultimate and most tragic consequence is the forfeiture of your creative power. The shadow is not just a sack of horrors, it is also the seat of your deepest, most instinctual life force. It contains not only your darkness but also your suppressed vitality, your wild creativity, your raw passion, your archaic wisdom. By walling it off, you don't just lock away your monsters, you lock away your gold. You become polite, predictable, and tame, and you wonder why your life feels so sterile, why your art feels so safe, why your spirit feels so contained. You have, In your effort to be good, become half dead. The very energy needed to live a vibrant, courageous, and authentic life is trapped behind the same door you are guarding against the dark. The rebellion is not just advisable, it is a necessity for survival. The dam you built to protect yourself is now the barrier that is slowly drowning you. The path to liberation begins with a single, radical, and counterintuitive act. You must stop fighting. You must lay down your arms in the civil war. This does not mean surrender to the darkness. It means surrendering the illusion that you can win by annihilation. The goal is not to defeat the shadow, but to diplomatically recognize it, to invite the rebel leader to the negotiating table. Jung called this process integration, and it is the most courageous psychological work you will ever undertake. The first step is the cultivation of ruthless, non-judgmental awareness. Your entire life you have been a judge, sentencing parts of yourself to life in prison without parole. Now, you must become an anthropologist. Your task is not to condemn or praise, but to observe and document. This requires a profound shift. In consciousness, you must begin to notice the flash of jealousy, the spike of rage, the petty thought, the arrogant daydream, not as moral failures, but as data points. They are telegrams from the exile. They are the shadow knocking on the door not with a battering ram but with a message. The question changes from how dare I feel this to what is this feeling trying to tell me? This is where you begin to catch your projections in real time. That moment you feel a surge of irrational dislike for someone. Stop. Before you assign the flaw to them, turn the arrow inward. Ask yourself, what is it about this person that triggers me? Could it be that I disown this very quality in myself? This is not about blaming yourself, it is about reclaiming your energy. Every time you withdraw a projection, you take back a piece of your soul. You are saying, this hatred, this irritation, belongs to me. I will own it and understand it. The person who was your enemy moments ago often transforms into a neutral, or even a teacher, showing you a part of yourself you had refused to see. The next step is active imagination, a deliberate, structured dialogue with the shadow. This is not mere daydreaming, it is a conscious venture into the underworld. In a state of quiet reflection, you allow an image of your shadow to emerge. It might appear as a dark figure, a monster, a rejected child, a cynical stranger. The psyche will provide its own symbolism. And then you speak to it. You ask it, what do you want? Why are you here? What have you come to teach me? And crucially, you allow it to answer. You give voice to the very thoughts you have spent a lifetime suppressing. You will hear your own pettiness, your own greed, your own rage. It will be uncomfortable. But in doing so, you are not becoming these things. You are acknowledging that they already exist within you. You are robbing them of their autonomous demonic power by bringing them into the light of consciousness. This is the alchemical work. You are taking the base leaden material of your repressed self and, through the heat of your attention, beginning to transmute it into gold. The energy you once used for repression is now freed up for creativity. The rage, when acknowledged and understood, can reveal its core as a passion for justice or a need for healthy boundaries. The envy can be transformed into a roadmap for your own ambitions, showing you what you truly desire. The childish greed can be integrated as a healthy form of self-care and an ability to enjoy life's pleasures without guilt. This rebellion is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice. It is the constant work of turning towards your discomfort instead of away from it. Viktor Frankl, who understood the power of choice in the face of unimaginable darkness, wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. The integration of the shadow is the deliberate expansion of that space. When the colleague's comment triggers you, the space between the stimulus, the comment, and your response, the rage, widens. In that new, fertile space, you have a choice. You can still choose to respond, but now it can be a conscious response. not an autonomous possession. This path is fraught with danger. There is the risk of identification, where you mistake understanding the shadow for becoming it, swinging from repression to indulgence. This is not integration. It is possession by another name. The goal is not to act out every impulse, but to remove their compulsive, unconscious control over you. The integrated individual is not a saint without sin, nor a sinner without remorse. They are a whole person who knows their own capacity for darkness so intimately that they no longer need to express it blindly. They have made peace with their inner rebel, and in doing so, the rebellion ends. You are not trying to kill the stowaway. You are inviting him up from the hold, giving him a job, and listening to his advice. The ship steers truer for it. The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization, after the long descent into the underworld, after facing the specters you once fled, after the difficult work of negotiation and integration, you arrive at the final, most powerful realization. It is a truth that reconfigures reality itself, not as an external structure, but as an internal experience. The ultimate truth is this: the shadow is not your enemy. It never was. It is your unrecognized guide, your unlived life, your forgotten wholeness begging to be remembered. The darkness you feared was not the absence of light, but the light itself, waiting to be understood. This is the paradigm shift that redefines everything. You spent a lifetime believing that consciousness was a pristine, well-lit room, and the shadow was a monster trying to break in and shatter the peace. The truth is that consciousness is a tiny lantern in an immense, dark landscape. The shadow is not the darkness. It is the vast, uncharted territory of your own soul that exists beyond the pathetic circle of your ego's light. The goal was never to brighten the room until the darkness vanished, an impossible task. The goal was to gather the courage to step beyond the lantern's glow and explore the land. And in doing so, you discover that the monster was just a part of the landscape you were too afraid to name. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of the coincidentia oppositorum, the coincidence of opposites. Wholeness is not the victory of good over evil, light over dark, persona over shadow. It is the transcendent third thing that arises when these opposites are held in tension, respected, and reconciled. The saint is not someone who has no capacity for sin, but someone who understands their capacity for sin so profoundly that they have consciously chosen a different path. Their virtue is not innocence, it is hard-won wisdom. Their light is brilliant precisely because it acknowledges and even contains the darkness. A light that denies the existence of darkness is a feeble, ignorant light. A light that has embraced and integrated the darkness is a sun. This realization dissolves the last vestiges of your spiritual materialism, the belief that you are on a linear path from flawed to perfect. You are not. You are on a circular path toward completeness. The shadow is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be engaged with for a lifetime. It is the eternal wellspring of your creativity, the source of your depth, the root of your compassion. How can you possibly forgive others their transgressions if you have not first forgiven yourself your own? How can you hold space for a friend's darkness if you cannot hold space for your own? Your integration makes you more human, more relatable, more real. You no longer project perfection, and therefore you stop demanding it from others. You become a sanctuary of understanding in a world desperate to disown itself. The final, most liberating truth is that the entire journey, the pain, the projection, the self-sabotage, the shame, was not a mistake. It was a necessary initiation. The ego had to be built. A persona had to be constructed. A shadow had to be created. You had to feel the agony of fragmentation to truly crave the peace of wholeness. You had to wage the war to appreciate the value of peace. The fall was necessary for the rise to have meaning. Your weaknesses, your flaws, your darkest impulses, they are not aberrations. They are the precise, custom-designed curriculum for your soul's evolution. They are the sandpaper roughing you up, the chisel cracking you open, not to destroy you, but to reveal the sculpture that was always hidden within the stone. So you stop seeking a life without conflict. You begin to seek a life with meaningful conflict. You stop seeking to be a good person, and you start seeking to be a whole person. And in that wholeness, you discover a different kind of goodness, one that is resilient, compassionate, and true. You look at the world, with all its blinding projections and raging shadows, not with judgment, but with a heartbreaking kind of recognition. You see the unintegrated pain playing out on a global scale, and your fight is no longer to defeat the darkness in others, but to illuminate it within yourself, trusting that this is the only way your own light can ever truly reach them. You stand at the center of your own being, finally at home. The lantern of your ego now casts a wider, softer, more forgiving light. You are no longer afraid of the sounds in the darkness beyond because you know the territory. You have walked it. You have spoken to its inhabitants, and you understand that they were never monsters. They were just lost parts of you waiting to be welcomed home. The journey does not end. It simply begins again, from a place of deeper, quieter, more unshakable knowing. You are not who you thought you were. You are so much more. You are the light and the darkness and the peace that holds them both.